My girlfriend sat me down and said, "I like you, but I'm not in love with you," but wanted nothing to change. I thanked her and started treating her exactly like the roommate she described. Her panic was instant. The words hit me like a carefully aimed punch to the gut. 3 years together, 18 months living in my apartment, and Meredith just casually dropped that bombshell while I was planning our weekend getaway to the mountains. She sat there on my couch, looking almost relieved to finally say it out loud, explaining how she values our friendship and doesn't want to lead me on anymore. The kicker? She wanted everything else to stay exactly the same. Same apartment, same bed, same financial arrangements, same couple activities. Just without that pesky romantic love part. I felt something shift inside me, like a switch flipping from emotional to analytical. This wasn't heartbreak talking anymore. This was strategy. After she went to watch TV, seemingly satisfied with her honest conversation, I sat in my kitchen processing what had actually just happened. She'd essentially friend-zoned me while expecting to keep all the boyfriend benefits. The audacity was almost impressive, but here's what Meredith didn't know about me, what she'd somehow missed after 3 years together. I'm a senior financial analyst for Meridian Consulting Group, one of the city's top restructuring firms. I've spent the last 6 years learning how to identify unsustainable arrangements, spot one-sided deals, and restructure failing partnerships. My entire career revolves around finding inefficiencies and correcting them. I specialize in corporate turnarounds where one party is bleeding resources while the other takes advantage. And what she just described to me was the most inefficient relationship model I'd ever encountered. Let me paint the full picture of what I was actually dealing with. My base salary is $95,000, plus performance bonuses that typically push me over $120,000 annually. Meredith works as a marketing coordinator, making about $52,000. The financial imbalance in our relationship had developed gradually, but the numbers were stark when I actually looked at them through my professional lens. I covered roughly 73% of our shared expenses because it made sense given our income difference. I paid the full rent on our downtown apartment, $2,100 monthly, while she contributed $600 for her share of utilities and groceries. Beyond the basic numbers, I'd been funding what I thought was our shared future. The weekly flower deliveries from Petals and Stems cost $48 monthly. Dinner dates averaged $180 per week, with me covering the full amount about 85% of the time. Concert tickets, weekend trips, anniversary gifts, birthday celebrations. I was running a full-scale romantic operation for someone who had just told me she wasn't romantically interested. The mental math was brutal. I'd invested approximately $28,400 over the past year in relationship expenses that were apparently one-sided. But the financial disparity wasn't even my biggest advantage here. What Meredith really underestimated was my professional network and my systematic approach to problem solving. Through my work at Meridian, I have contacts in real estate, legal services, and financial planning. I've helped restructure dozens of partnerships where one party was taking advantage of another's generosity. More importantly, I'm naturally methodical. I document important conversations using voice memos and detailed notes, track expenses through 3 different apps, and I never make major decisions without thorough analysis. These weren't just personality quirks. They were about to become weapons. The apartment lease was in my name only. I'd wanted to add her when we moved in together, but she'd insisted it was easier this way for tax purposes. Her credit score, which I'd learned about during our mortgage pre-qualification discussions last year, was sitting at 580 due to some student loan issues she'd never fully resolved. Most of her furniture was still at her parents' house in storage because she'd moved in with just 2 suitcases and never bothered to get the rest. Essentially, she was living in my space with my resources, while contributing a fraction of the actual costs. I also knew something she didn't realize I knew. During our mortgage discussions, I'd seen her full financial picture. She had $1,200 in savings, $8,400 in credit card debt, and her car payment was $380 monthly on a loan with 18% interest because of her credit issues. Without my financial support, she was essentially living paycheck to paycheck while maintaining a lifestyle that required my income to sustain. That night, lying awake while she slept peacefully beside me, I made a decision that would reshape everything. If Meredith wanted to be just friends, then I'd give her exactly that, with all the boundaries and limitations that come with friendship. No more romantic gestures, no more financial subsidies, no more emotional labor. Just two people who like each other, sharing living space, and splitting expenses fairly. I started documenting everything that night, creating a detailed log with timestamps of our conversation and my planned response strategy. The next morning, I started implementing what I privately called my friendship adjustment plan. No good morning kiss, no have a great day babe text when I left early for a client meeting. When she texted asking what I wanted for dinner, I replied with simple courtesy. I'll grab something on the way home. Thanks though. Not cold, not angry, just friendly and appropriately distant. My first stop after work was Petals and Stems, where I'd been a loyal customer for over a year. Martha, the owner, knew my weekly order by heart. Mixed seasonal bouquet, heavy on the peonies when available, delivered every Tuesday. I need to cancel my standing order, I told her, pulling out my phone to show her the confirmation numbers. Effective immediately. She looked confused. Apparently, I seemed like the type of guy who'd never stop buying his girlfriend flowers. Relationship status change, I explained simply. Thanks for everything. I photographed the cancellation receipt and added it to my documentation file. $12 per week doesn't sound like much until you multiply it out. That's $624 annually on flowers for someone who just told me she wasn't in love with me. It was a small but symbolic first step in what would become a complete financial restructuring. When I got home, Meredith had cooked dinner, pasta primavera, one of my favorites. We sat together talking about work like we always did, but I noticed her watching me carefully, like she was waiting for something. After dinner, she settled onto the couch and patted the space beside her for our usual Netflix routine. I gave her a brief, friendly hug and then moved to the armchair across the room. Her face showed confusion, but she didn't say anything. Perfect. The new boundaries were being established without drama or explanation. Thursday was when I made the big move. While she was at work, I spent my day off completely reorganizing our living situation. All my toiletries moved from the master bathroom to the hall bathroom. My clothes shifted from the walk-in closet to the guest room dresser. I set up the guest room as my new bedroom and office space, complete with my desk, computer setup, and the reading chair I'd bought but rarely used. I documented each change with photos and notes, treating it like the corporate restructuring it essentially was. When Meredith came home to find me setting up my printer in what was now my room, her reaction was immediate. "What's all this?" she asked, standing in the doorway looking genuinely disturbed. I explained calmly that I thought we should have separate spaces since we were basically roommates who liked each other. The word roommates made her face twitch in a way that told me everything I needed to know about how she'd really envisioned this arrangement working. "Roommates?" she repeated, like the word tasted wrong. "Well, yeah," I said, not looking up from connecting cables. "You like me, I like you. We share living space and expenses. That's the definition of roommates." She started arguing that we were still together, still dating, still a couple. I asked her how that worked exactly, given that she'd explicitly told me she wasn't in love with me. Her response was fascinating. Lots of couples aren't in love, but still have relationships. I told her that sounded like friends with benefits, and I wasn't interested in that arrangement. The conversation ended with her storming off to call her sister Jenna, and me finishing my room setup with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in months. I could hear her through the thin walls, explaining to Jenna how I was being weird and overreacting. Jenna's response was muffled, but I caught enough to know she wasn't entirely sympathetic to Meredith's position. Friday brought the first real test of my new system. She came home with expensive takeout from Thai Palace, our special occasion restaurant, where entrees run $28 to $35 each. She'd gotten the full spread: appetizers, entrees, dessert, even the good wine. "I thought we could have a nice night together," she said, setting everything up on the dining table with what looked like nervous energy. I thanked her genuinely, ate my portion, and then did something I'd never done before. I sent her a Venmo request for exactly half the bill, $73.50 for my share of dinner. She stared at her phone like it had grown tentacles. "Are you serious?" she asked. "Just settling up between roommates," I replied. "No rush, but end of month would be great." Her sputtering was incredible. She'd apparently assumed that me paying for everything was just standard male behavior, not something I did because I loved her and wanted to take care of my girlfriend. When I reminded her that we weren't in a relationship, we were roommates who liked each other, she actually hung up on me and locked herself in what used to be our bedroom. That evening, while I was at the gym, my phone exploded with texts, 15 messages ranging from, "Why are you being like this?" to "We need to talk," to "Please come home so we can work this out." I replied calmly, "Like what? I thought you'd be happy. You were honest about your feelings, and I'm respecting them by adjusting my behavior accordingly. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people who like each other, sharing living space." When I got home, she was waiting up, ready for what was clearly going to be a confrontation. She accused me of being petty and childish. I stayed completely calm and told her I was just matching her energy. She wanted a friend, now she had one, a good one. I'd split bills, do my share of chores, be pleasant company. But the boyfriend experience, romance, dates, gifts, emotional labor, future planning, that was reserved for someone who was actually in love with me. The panic was starting to show. She made breakfast Saturday morning, her signature French toast that she usually only made for special occasions, or when she wanted something. "Can we please just go back to normal?" she asked, sliding a plate toward me. "This is normal," I replied, "for roommates who like each other." She accused me of punishing her for being honest. I told her I wasn't punishing anyone. I was being honest too, honest about what I was willing to give to someone who only liked me. The conversation revealed what I'd suspected. She'd never actually thought through the implications of her honesty. She'd wanted to clear her conscience while keeping all the practical benefits of having a devoted boyfriend. But the real moment of truth came when her sister Jenna called about their mother's birthday dinner the following month. Family dinners, parties, weddings. Suddenly she was realizing how many couple activities she'd taken for granted. When I told her to tell her family I couldn't make it, that family dinners were for couples and we were just roommates who liked each other, the look on her face was priceless. Like she was finally understanding what she'd thrown away. The following week brought escalation. Monday, she tried to initiate sex. I politely declined, explaining that I wasn't comfortable being intimate with someone who wasn't in love with me. She argued that lots of people have casual sex, and I agreed, but said I wasn't interested in that arrangement with her. "But we've been having sex for 3 years, she protested. "Yeah," I replied, "when I thought we were in love." Tuesday brought the financial reckoning I'd been preparing. See, we'd had an arrangement where I paid for most entertainment expenses on my credit card, and she was supposed to transfer me her half later. Except she rarely did. I'd never pushed it because, well, girlfriend. But roommates split everything evenly. I spent Monday evening going through credit card statements, categorizing expenses, and building a comprehensive spreadsheet. Dinners out, concerts, weekend trips, even movie tickets. Everything we'd done together over the past 3 months. I used the same analytical tools I employed for corporate restructuring, creating detailed categories and calculating exact amounts. The total was staggering. $1,847 for her half of our shared entertainment expenses. I sent her an itemized Venmo request with attached receipts and a professional-looking breakdown. She called immediately. "Are you serious right now?" Her voice had a hysteria that told me she'd never actually calculated what I'd been covering. "Just settling up between roommates," I said calmly. "No rush, but end of month would be great." The sputtering was incredible. She'd somehow convinced herself that these were gifts because that's what guys do. I reminded her that we weren't in a relationship. We were roommates who liked each other. Wednesday brought reinforcements. Her best friend Chloe came over, clearly sent as an emissary. We had dinner, Dutch treat naturally, and Chloe kept making comments about how cold I was being, how Meredith was just being honest about her feelings, how relationships evolve. I asked Chloe if she'd want to date someone who explicitly told her they weren't in love with her. Silence. Then I asked if she'd want her boyfriend to do all the boyfriend things. Flowers, dates, emotional support, future planning, while knowing he didn't love her. More silence. When Meredith kicked her under the table, it wasn't subtle. Thursday brought the crisis that revealed just how precarious Meredith's financial situation really was. Her car needed major repairs, $2,200 worth. For the past 2 years, I'd been her safety net for big expenses like this. car troubles, medical bills, even helping her pay down credit card debt when she'd overspent on clothes. She texted asking if I could help her out, promising to pay me back. "Sorry, that's a lot of money," I replied. "Maybe try a payment plan with the mechanic?" She called immediately, near tears. Turns out her credit score made payment plans impossible. She didn't have savings because she'd been living above her means, subsidized by my generosity. Suddenly, the financial reality of not having a devoted boyfriend was becoming very real. She took an Uber to work the next morning, $47 each way. I documented this expense in my notes, calculating that at this rate, her transportation costs alone would exceed $470 per week. By Friday, she broke down completely, full tears and dramatic sobs. She claimed she'd been going through a rough patch, feeling confused, maybe depressed. Now she was sure she loved me, was in love with me, had just gotten scared of how serious things were getting. I asked her to clarify. Was she lying then, or was she lying now? The tears stopped pretty quickly. She got defensive, accused me of manipulating her. That's when I pulled out my phone and showed her the notes I'd taken after our original conversation. Yes, I document important conversations now. It's a professional habit that was proving personally invaluable. I read her own words back to her. "I like you, but I'm not in love with you. I want to be honest. I don't want anything to change." She tried to gaslight me, claiming that's not what she meant. But I had screenshots. She'd even texted her sister that night, proud of herself. Finally told Ryan I'm not in love with him. Feel so much better being honest. Saturday brought the nuclear option. Meredith called her parents, put them on speaker, and told them I was being emotionally abusive by withdrawing affection after she'd been vulnerable with me. Her dad, bless him, asked for specifics. She explained the whole situation to dead silence. Then her dad said, "So you told him you don't love him, but you're upset he's not acting like he loves you?" Even her mom, who usually took Meredith's side in everything, said, "Sweetheart, what did you expect?" The call ended quickly after that. Meredith spent the rest of the day in her room, and I could hear her making multiple phone calls, to Jenna, to Chloe, to other friends. Each conversation seemed to go worse than the last, based on the increasingly frustrated tone of her voice. 2 weeks later, Meredith made her final play. She went full nuclear, calling my parents who live 3 hours away in Springfield, telling them she was worried about my mental health and convincing them to drive down for an intervention. I came home to find them sitting on my couch with Meredith, who was crying delicately into tissues. My mom jumped up when I walked in. "Honey, why didn't you tell us you were going through such a hard time?" Apparently, Meredith had painted a picture of me as mentally unstable, withdrawing from everyone, acting erratically. I sat down calmly and explained the actual situation, how Meredith had told me she wasn't in love with me, how I'd accepted that and adjusted our relationship accordingly, how she was upset that I wouldn't continue being her boyfriend after she'd explicitly stated she didn't love me romantically. My dad, usually pretty quiet, looked at Meredith and said, "You called us here because my son won't date someone who doesn't love him?" My mom was processing. "But sweetheart," she said to Meredith, "if you're not in love with him, why are you still here?" Meredith launched into her sob story about going through something difficult and me abandoning her in her time of need, how cruel I was being by punishing her honesty. My mom asked me directly, "Are you punishing her?" I pulled out my phone and showed them my bank statements, the flowers I'd been buying weekly, the dinner dates, the concert tickets, the weekend trips, all one-sided for months. Then I showed them my current expenses, split down the middle like actual roommates. "I'm not punishing her, Mom. I'm just not subsidizing her lifestyle anymore." My dad actually laughed. "Good for you." That's when Meredith really lost it, accusing me of turning my parents against her, calling me manipulative and financially abusive. My mom's patience finally ran out. In that deadly calm voice mother's perfect, she said, "Honey, you've been letting my son pay for your life while telling him you don't love him, and you have the audacity to call him abusive." They left shortly after. Dad shook my hand on the way out. Mom whispered that she'd never really liked Meredith anyway, but hadn't wanted to interfere. The validation felt incredible. The aftermath was intense. Meredith called in sick to work for the rest of the week, spending most of it cycling through what I recognized as the stages of grief. Thursday brought love bombing, elaborate meals, my favorite beer, that dress she knew I liked. I thanked her politely. Venmo'd her for my half of the grocery bill, and went about my day. Friday brought anger, screaming about how I'd humiliated her in front of my parents, accusations of sociopathy for being so cold. I actually recorded this conversation, legal in our state with one-party consent. Saturday brought bargaining. Maybe we could start fresh, she'd go to therapy, we could do couples counseling. No thanks, I said. I don't need therapy to know I deserve someone who's actually in love with me. Sunday brought depression. She didn't leave her room except for water. Chloe came by and gave me dirty looks until I asked how her own boyfriend would react if she told him she wasn't in love with him. She left pretty quickly after that. Monday brought the real extinction burst. I woke up to texts from mutual friends, lots of them. Meredith had posted on social media about our breakup, claiming I'd been financially controlling throughout our relationship, that I'd isolated her from friends and manipulated her into dependency. The evidence? Screenshots of my Venmo requests, taken completely out of context to make it look like I was nickel and diming her for everything. I didn't respond publicly. Instead, I started a group chat with the friends who'd reached out, Derek, Marcus, Lisa, and Tom from our college group. I shared the full story with screenshots of her "I'm not in love with you" texts, the itemized list showing how I'd covered 73% of our shared expenses for 2 years, even the recordings of her meltdowns. One by one, they started to understand. Her narrative fell apart when people realized she wanted me to keep paying for everything after explicitly telling me she didn't love me. The best response came from Derek. "So she friend-zoned you but wanted to keep the boyfriend benefits package? That's wild," Marcus added. "Dude, you dodged a bullet. My ex tried something similar, but not this calculated." By evening, Meredith's post had mysteriously disappeared, and several mutual friends had reached out privately to apologize for initially believing her version. Tuesday, she finally started packing, quietly, efficiently, no drama. I found out from Chloe, who reached out to apologize for judging me, that Meredith's parents had read her the riot act after seeing the social media drama. They were mortified that their daughter had tried to manipulate someone who'd been financially supporting her, and they offered to pay her security deposit just to get her out of my apartment. Wednesday brought the logistics of separation. Meredith's sister Jenna came by to help with the packing. She was polite but clearly embarrassed by the whole situation. "I'm sorry this got so messy," she said to me, while Meredith was loading boxes. I tried to tell her she was being unreasonable, but she wouldn't listen. I appreciated the apology and told her there were no hard feelings toward the family. Thursday, Meredith made one final attempt at reconciliation. She knocked on my door, now permanently my room, and asked to talk. She admitted it had been a test. She'd read some article about relationships needing brutal honesty and wanted to see if I'd fight for her. She thought telling me she wasn't in love would make me try harder, be more romantic, prove my worth. "I didn't think you'd actually stop loving me," she said. "I didn't stop loving you, Meredith," I replied. "I stopped showing it to someone who told me they didn't want it." She asked if there was any chance for us. I said no. She nodded, said she understood, and left. Friday morning, I watched from my window as she loaded the last boxes into her car. Chloe was there to help, and I could see them having an intense conversation before Meredith drove away. The apartment felt different immediately. Lighter, more spacious, more mine. That afternoon, I got a text from Chloe. "For what it's worth, I think you handled this better than most people would have. She's staying with me for now, but she's already talking about how she learned so much from this experience. Just thought you should know she's spinning this as personal growth, rather than consequences for her actions." I appreciated the heads up, but didn't respond. Meredith's narrative management wasn't my problem anymore. The financial impact became clear over the following weeks. My monthly expenses dropped by $1,340 immediately. No more subsidizing her lifestyle, no more romantic gestures, no more covering her shortfalls. I calculated that over our 3-year relationship, I'd spent approximately $47,000 more than my fair share of our combined expenses. That money had essentially been an investment in someone who was never as invested in me as I was in her. I used my newfound financial freedom strategically, paid off my car loan early, saving $2,800 in interest, increased my 401k contribution to the maximum, started looking at investment properties, something I'd always wanted to do but couldn't afford while supporting 2 people on my income. The apartment transformation was remarkable. I repainted the living room in colors I actually liked, bought furniture that suited my taste rather than compromising on everything, set up a proper home office in what had been the guest room. For the first time in years, my living space reflected my preferences rather than being a negotiated settlement. 3 months later, I ran into Jenna at the grocery store. She updated me on Meredith's situation without me asking. She's still with Chloe, but that's getting tense. Chloe's boyfriend isn't happy about the long-term house guest situation. Meredith's been dating, but apparently she keeps comparing everyone to you, specifically to how you used to treat her, not how things ended. I found that ironic but not surprising. How's she doing financially? I asked, genuinely curious. Struggling, Jenna admitted. She had to get a second job to afford her half of Chloe's expenses. Her car situation never got resolved. She's still taking Ubers sometimes. I think she finally understands what you were covering all those years. 6 months post-breakup, I started dating again. But this time, I approached it completely differently. I was upfront about expectations, clear about boundaries, and careful to maintain financial independence. I'd learned the difference between generosity and subsidization, between love and enabling. My first serious relationship post-Meredith was with Elena, a fellow financial professional who understood the importance of equitable partnerships. We split expenses proportionally based on income, but both contributed meaningfully. More importantly, she never questioned my romantic gestures or made me feel pathetic for expressing love openly. A year later, I got a LinkedIn message from Meredith. She'd apparently gotten a promotion at work and wanted to reconnect as friends. She mentioned how much she'd grown and learned from our relationship, how she now understood what she'd lost. I read the message, considered responding, and then deleted it. Some bridges once burned should stay that way. The lesson I learned wasn't about love or relationships specifically. It was about value and reciprocity. In my professional life, I'd never accept a partnership where one party contributed 73% of the resources while the other party questioned the value of those contributions. I'd learned to apply the same standards to my personal life. 2 years later, I'm engaged to Elena. We bought a house together, both our names on the deed, both contributing to the down payment proportionally. We plan dates together, surprise each other with gifts, and never take each other's efforts for granted. She tells me she loves me regularly, and more importantly, she shows it through her actions. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd fought for Meredith, if I'd tried harder to prove my worth after she told me she wasn't in love with me. But then I remember the relief I felt when she finally moved out, the peace of living authentically rather than performing for someone who didn't appreciate the performance. The best revenge wasn't elaborate or dramatic. It was simply taking someone at their word and letting them experience the full consequences of what they had asked for. Meredith wanted a friend who liked her. She got exactly that, with all the limitations and boundaries that friendship entails. She just hadn't considered what she'd be giving up in the process. Today, I'm grateful for that conversation on the couch 3 years ago. It forced me to examine what I was willing to accept in a relationship and what I deserved. It taught me that love without reciprocity isn't love, it's charity. And while charity has its place in the world, it doesn't belong at the foundation of a romantic partnership. The apartment where it all happened is now a rental property in my investment portfolio. Elena and I live in our house across town, where every decision is made together and every contribution is valued. It's a much better arrangement for everyone involved.